What up? So we're back with episode two. I'm already fucking up. We're back with episode two. Welcome to the spaceship. So today we're going to be speaking about values. Now this is a topic that Ollie brought up, and truthfully, I did not have a real thought when he said, "What are your values?" or if you want to do an episode on values. I didn't have a real thought about it in terms of like, well, what really are my values or what do values even mean to me? So, in this episode, we kind of want to cover one, what are values? Because I feel like although some people would have an idea, it might not necessarily be what exactly it is you think. But then, what are certain values to not only myself, but Ollie? And so, I want to let Ollie start off because I'm very interested to hear his perspective on them. So, if you want to just jump into it.
Yes, hello. So, hmm, values. I got into this YouTuber called Teal Swan, and one of her videos really put values into perspective for me because before that, as a common piece of self help advice, um, everybody was saying that you need to know your values. What what do you what was the previous definition? I don't even know. But now my definition is that values is what experiences you want to go through, and not necessarily the experiences, but you know what feelings, what states of being do you want to experience when you're here, and this is talking at a like higher level of metaphysics. What experiences are you creating from the marriage of your conscious and subconscious, knowing what you can do and how to get that? What kind of storyline are you trying to weave, follow up? You know what I mean?
Right. And so, see, that's where, for the listeners, I would like to make a distinction between what it was that I assumed that he meant by values and what actually it is that he's speaking about. And so, I want you to talk about, before I hop into mine, I want you to talk about more of what it is that you mean by values. I know you just kind of gave an example, but more on the side of the metaphysical, kind of achieving on the higher, you could say, consciousness thinking. Kind of dive a little bit more into that.
Yeah. So when I started to do self help, that was one of the main questions that I avoided because I didn't know what the fuck to do with it. Every time that I read advice that said start by knowing your values, even though they might
And
explain what it is.
I want to interrupt just real quick. What was you, and I know you said you were kind of blanking on that, but what was your idea of values before? Was it maybe similar? Because I know I shared mine with you. Was it maybe similar to kind of what I was saying, or was it something entirely different?
It was pretty much it was on the surface level. That's the thing. Whenever I think about how I used to think back then, it's not different than now. It's just that the things that I knew, I only explored to the surface level. There is so
Okay.
much depth on every topic that we're interested to, and values are no different. And so it was just like a set of words that when you recall them, it reminded you of what kind of life you're trying to live. But it was very ambiguous, like how do values actually play a role in that? It's the guiding principles, but do we follow them or do we create experiences that bring those about? You know what I mean?
Right. And that's kind of to even hop into manifestation a bit and the subconscious mind and it creating your reality. Um, and so to give a little bit more context, I'll kind of speak about what I thought values represented. So I look at values in two ways. I look at it as one, the principles that guide your decisions. So think of that as like your moral compass, or almost to say like your inner code. Like, and that could even be something that you were taught as a kid, right? Like maybe your mom or your dad instilled into you like integrity or honesty, discipline in certain things, or even something like courage. Right? Like I'm gonna act in the face of fear in certain situations. So we'll kind of outline that as like those are your laws of operation, the things that you hold yourself accountable for in real time. And I gave the example to Ollie before we started recording. Like maybe we're walking down the street and somebody says something rude to us. My values that I live by are like I'm not gonna respond back to them. That'd be like something in real time. But then on the other hand, the values that you shape your lifestyle by, or to say your foundation, um, like the pillars or commitments that you live your life by. So, like family, freedom, legacy. And so, those aren't always necessarily things that are daily decisions. Those are kind of just things that give the decisions that you make meaning. So, for example, you might live your life by just say integrity or like always being honest, open, transparent. But the reason why might be because of the foundation that you have from your family. And so that can be the value that was instilled in you. Maybe just to say your mom was always an open, honest person, or maybe your dad was always like courageous or outgoing, and so that's kind of something that was built into your pillar. And so that is to say, when he questioned this to me, or when he brought this question to me, I was thinking the same thing, like, what are my values? Because to be honest, and like we were saying in the last episode, for a good majority of my life, I mean, I spent wearing a mask, right? Like whether it was going to basketball practice and now I'm interacting with my teammates, if I'm even getting on like the Xbox and I'm hopping in a group chat party with my friends, like everywhere that I went, even around my parents, right? Like even around my little sister, my brothers, my mom, my dad, I had this mask that I would wear. And so that also brought us to the context of what mask are you wearing, slash what values are with that mask or that persona. So I want to ask you that question, Ollie. What persona, or not what persona, but what values would you associate with certain personas or masks that you had to wear just growing up or even maybe into your adult years?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I like that. So I I had to be honest, but oh, and this before I even answer, I wanted to make a note because it's when you think about what values you have before you even question who you are, they all came from somewhere. And so most of them come from the people that raise us, and it doesn't have to be our family members. We might uh, learn about certain values from teachers or from just random people in the community. But the thing is that we learn their version of what that value is and how they embody that value. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not
Not something, not something organically created from our own experience, something
right.
from someone else's, or just to even say an external force
Yes,
project
and
on
the
us.
the very way that we adapt to it, the very way that we ex- mm, live these values is from example, from those people that inculcated these values into us. And that can be good, but it can also be bad because some people that might say and brag or put out the message that they are honest, but you know them to a depth that transcends their persona, and you see that they can be very dishonest. Like,
Right.
what does that create for your version of what honesty is? So I just wanted to preface that because I've gone through a lot of shadow work that really delves into like this is what you thought your value was, but it turns out that the way that you've been practicing it because of how you grew up, it's very much in conflict with the definition.
That's an excellent point. Almost to say like maybe your value of, and actually that's actually magnificent. Maybe your, because I spoke about this in my last YouTube video, that a lot of young men's definition of being hard is aligning with things that really perpetuate and answer in violence. That's actually exactly what I said. For example, like instead of me working this solution out with words, I'm just gonna come and physically raise the altercation to be violent. And that could be what they, just through their value system have deemed, quote unquote, being hard. But yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and so this is what I discovered by coming to California and going through the whole Californian. school system. It's so comical in retrospect. But yeah, this is what I learned because I saw the patterns unfold in every kid. It's based on their home story. That's why they behave that way. And the thing is that I don't even have to ask them anything. They just be talking about it all the time, and every interaction that they have with one another, you can just pick up these patterns because that's all they live. And it's very sad to see, and that's why I need to get out of that environment because I don't I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. And so this, in and of itself, has challenged my values because I understand that this is not the way that I want to help people. I don't want to be like the person that has to come out to their face and tell them, "Hey, there's a better way to live," because I don't know how to do that in a appropriate manner.
I mean, you're basically going up to someone and saying like, the way you live is stupid, you know, but
Yeah.
that's not for you to say that it's stupid, but you're subjectively looking at it like, hey, I mean, you're maybe sad or experiencing discomfort in your life. Here's my opinion why. And a lot of people really don't like to hear that kind of stuff. So I agree. I understand where you're coming from with that. I'm actually really interested to hear your answer. So I want to ask again, is a person at any age, even just to say last week, if you have one, what persona or what values were you attaching to certain personas, or what masks were creating certain values for you?
Yes, so the teacher, I guess, it's one of the archetypes that I attune to very easily because my dad was and kind of still is. Once you're a teacher, you're always a teacher, kind of thing. Um, and so I've always been very. Hmm, nothing that I say is ever with the intention to brag, so just understand that. But I've always been very laborious, I guess, in studying because that's how I was raised. I remember since very little, my mom would help me with my homework, but not by doing it, but by walking me through everything based on what my dad knows about how to teach a kid. He taught her to teach me. So it was a really beautiful connection to teaching, and it made sense. Doesn't matter what subject it was, it just made sense. So that was one of my blessings, right? But when it came to helping others, I used to think that I wanted to do it because, and by helping, I mean teaching them about anything really. Um, I thought that I wanted to help them, but ultimately, I just wanted to tell somebody, and this is the dark side of my teacher personality, that I knew the answers to what they were suffering through. That's why I wanted to learn because I've suffered through so much shit in my life that I had to question myself. How does that even happen, and how do I avoid it in the future? And so by I don't know, collecting all of these patterns and understanding that it's all just the same story. We just go through different timelines, you know? It's ultimately we're all human beings. Um, but I've already gone way past the point of your answer, right? But it's just one of those things that once I open the door, it just keeps coming. Let me just
Right.
take
And
a
I mean,
minute.
honestly, it's another thing too, and I would like to highlight this because this is almost to kind of get into shadow work. You got to keep in mind, people, once you ask yourself, or once a certain question is asked to you might be thinking about conscious answers to whatever question was asked, but your subconscious has a bunch of stored up grief, trauma, instability, pain, sorrow. I mean, we can just go on. That's been trapped in there that hasn't had, like Ali just said, the chance for the door to be open. So as soon as the door is opened, everything's going to rush through. So it's important to, and let's take a side sticky note real quick. This is why it's really important to journal. I mean, if you journal on the computer, that's fine. I'm like a paper and pen kind of person. I never used to be, but this is why it's really important to journal because you can say to yourself, okay, I'm thinking about that, so it's healthy, but are you ever getting it out of your system, so to speak? And the answer would be no. You're opening the door, which is a good thing, right? Like that's step one. We got to open the door to receive something or let it go. but we actually have to then take it out of the door and set it outside the house, to put it to like a physical representation. But for me to kind of come back to the wearing masks and attaching value, one thing that I'd like to highlight is that a lot of people, their external experiences shape what this value that they're going to have with this mask projects. And so things like defense mechanisms, or even say the roles that you play in life, are going to shape these masks. And then the masks are going to shape the values that you actually are living your life by. So things like perfection, success slash achievement, loyalty, strength, false humility, and even to say peace. We interpret these things as like good things, like, okay, these are things to strive for. But there's kind of a twist, right? Because these things can technically be conditional, because they can be rooted in fear, performance, or just rather to say like feeling like you're not accomplishing, like you're chasing success, but it's not because you want to be successful, it's because you don't want to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that's not rooted in something healthy. That would be rooted in like a fearful result of failing, like I said. And so we can wear confidence, but it can be to hide insecurity. You can wear independence, but it can be because you've never had anyone, and that's the only way that you cope with having no one, is by saying, well, I'm independent, I don't need anybody. You can say that you wear loyalty, but it's because you've been left behind, and you don't want to be left behind. And you can wear humility just so you're not hated for your greatness. And honestly, that's one that I struggled with, honestly, my whole life. People would say that I'm cocky, and this is like a whole separate episode that I plan actually to bring out with Ali, but would be humble versus humility. And I won't get too much into that, but just to speak specifically on the humility aspect, I feel like there's a lot of people out there in the world, whether you want to call them chosen ones or spiritual or honestly whatever. It could even be a regular person. You don't have to have any kind of label attached to you, but they're good at something, or they're proud of themselves, or for something, or even just to say that they're happy that they're doing something. Maybe they're not even the best at it, they're just happy they're doing it, but they hide themselves and they make that mask. And then that value that's attached to it is like, well, let me be humble, let me have humility. And you're really just, like I said, from the base of it, your pillar is rooted in the fact that you don't want to be hated for being great, or maybe you're fearful of being what it is that you are. um, and so, yeah, for me, honestly, that literally was my mask that I had to wear. Was, hey, I'm really good at this thing, but if I say that I'm good at this thing, a lot of people are going to look at it and kind of attach something that is entirely untrue. And even like you just said, Ollie, you're like, nothing that I'm saying is to be egotistical. It's just my experience. It's just how I live my life. And so it's like the same thing. I would wear that mask every day, almost to say like false humility. So
Yeah, and that's something that I've noticed about basketball players. And not to say that I've met a lot. Like, you and my cousin are literally the only ones that I've spoken to. But it comes from the discipline of basketball. And especially the basketball players who can be vulnerable, because that's very hard for men. But for example, him, every time that he tries to get with a girl, the girls are always assuming that he's a player. And I know this guy, he's not a player, he's a goofball. But that's the assumption that other people have of him. And so humility for him looks like always explaining himself. And that for me
mm,
has been the same thing, and it's because we have the same family roots, the same generational trauma that you cannot show off at all, but not even show off. Okay, you cannot show off. That's a no-no, right? But you can. It goes to the point that you can't even acknowledge that you're doing good things. Like, it's taken to an extreme that it's unnecessary. You can stand in confidence of your abilities. That doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can actually balance that out, and that's one thing that we don't learn to do, to balance.
that was honestly a bar right there, because that is genuinely something that I have struggled with myself, is that I over explain everything that I do, because I feel like if I don't have an explanation for it, then it's going to get taken out of context. I can't just oh, I'm good at this and leave it at that. I have to explain why. Well, ever since I was this age, I did this and I did this and I learned this from this person. And it's just like, even to say this is a whole separate conversation, but that's even just draining in and of itself. And so imagine
And
going in,
can I also add another one besides draining? It also
yeah,
accomplishes the opposite, which I've noticed with myself too. When I over explain, I'm like, I'm over explaining because I want this narrative to be avoided because I know that that's not what I mean, and then I end up making it about that.
right. And so it's almost like you have to do the opposite, reverse, to live within that truth. So if you're telling yourself, okay, I'm good at this thing, and someone comes and makes you, give an example how you're good at that thing, or let me clear it up. What pretty much I'm saying is like, imagine if I was trying to explain to Ollie how good I am at basketball. Instead of just saying I'm good at basketball and leaving it at that, I'm over explaining myself. And it's like, instead of doing that, I just need to live within my truth, that is, I'm good at basketball, and leave it at that. There doesn't need to be an explanation. There doesn't need to be the over dramatized. I can't say that word right now. Y'all know what I'm saying. Um, but anyways, point is though, you're putting too much into something that doesn't need to be thought out like that or put into. And so not only is it draining, what I was going to say is it requires so much energy to reproduce that every single time you have to bring that up. And so I just said this to one of my good friends on the phone. We were talking about some like nutrition stuff, but I had said to her that, or no, what did she say to me? Oh, when you're about to say something, the shit just kind of flows out your brain. Because I had something else I wanted to bring up too. But anyways, if that thought comes back to me, it'll come back to me. But point is though, you're putting so much energy into something that you never even realize how much energy it's taking out of your life. And that kind of goes back to that mask and the shadow work of like, you need to really look within and understand what it is that's draining your life force from you. So you might think a external situation with an ex, maybe, or even a lady or a man friend, is what's pulling your energy. But truthfully, it could be something that's within you, like a over explaining yourself all the time. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
And so I have some prompts that I want to give out here. I've got three. And so these could be questions that you ask yourself and do a journal prompt about. These could be maybe just questions you ask yourself on the daily when maybe you find yourself coming across a situation where you're like, damn, I'm wearing this mat. And I want to point this out too. Once you become self-aware of these things, and so like I said at the beginning, things live in your subconscious mind, but once we're able to get them to our conscious mind, that's when I say we're really able to heal them. The first step is opening that door to the subconscious to say like, well, what things are wrong in my life, or what defense mechanisms, what external expectations or problems are actually there that I'm ignoring, or in other words, just saying, or just being in the subconscious. um, but here they are. So what values have I adopted to survive, not thrive? What do I want people to think I value that maybe I don't deeply believe? What part of me does this mask protect? And honestly, my favorite question out of these three is the bottom one, or the last one. What part of me does this mask protect? And I feel like honestly, that's a question everybody should start out with, because truthfully, I mean, in some way, shape, or form, we all wear a mask. Whether you want to call it code switching, whether you want to call it downplaying who you truly are, upscaling who you are, right? Maybe you're in a job and you're per, giving a persona like you're better than what you are, and not saying better like not worthy, but like you're in a job where everybody has to be at the top of their top. And so maybe you're not a person who's at the top of the top, and this is coming from personal experience. I cannot tell y'all enough, and yeah, I don't necessarily know. Me and Ollie, I mean, we talk how we talk. I talk how I talk. I'm black, so I say what I say. But I've been in places where it's like just straight up, I'm a nigga, bro. Like the way my family grew up, the way my dad talked to me, like I was 5 years old, 6 years old, and my dad would be like, "Come on, nigga, hurry up, little nigga." Like that's just how my dad spoke. And so I've been in plenty of instances, and I'm sure people of color will understand. But I've been in plenty instances where it's like niggas don't belong here. But not even in a racial setting, not even in a race matter like whatsoever. Just in terms of like the way I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at where I'm at. I'm like, dude, I gotta wear a mask that projects me in a higher light than what it is that I really am. But that also could be in the flip flop. Maybe you are that higher light, but you're in a predicament where it's like I've got to downplay who I am a little bit just so I can settle to the level of others. And Ollie, that's actually a great point, and I would like you to talk about what you and I were just talking about earlier, where it's like you've almost got to come and meet people where they're at because you have to pull yourself down. And just to give a little preface, we pretty much were talking about the fact that there's a lot of people in both our lives because we were giving examples where it's like we have to turn down the volume on who it is that we are so these people can come and actually be at the same level as us. But again, not in like a humble or I'm better than you, just in a state of like, just to call it what it is. I vibrate at a higher frequency. Like you're upset at the person who cut you off in traffic, and I hardly get upset at all. That's two different frequencies, let alone two different ways that people live their lives. But I would love to get your aspect on that, kind of turning your volume down to meet people.
Um, well, honestly, I learned it all from my job, substitute teaching. Because one thing, and I don't know if anybody has said this before, but one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people are out here living their life still on teenage phases, meaning they reminisce on their best years, which are teenagehood. They haven't grown from them, and physically they have, but mentally and emotionally they're stunted there. Um, and that's something that I just can't, especially here in California. It's so blatant, but it's because of my interest into human psychology that I can see this. I didn't, I can't avoid it anymore, but now it's so in my face. I cannot see just anybody who's wearing a mask without knowing what that mask is. It's just intuitive knowing. Um, and so I notice whenever people meet me with a mask, it's very obvious now. uh, yeah, I used to be very gullible. So whenever people would be sarcastic, I couldn't pick up sarcasm. Um, so a lot of people would, not a lot, but I had some instances in which people were actually playing on my face, and I didn't know that. It wasn't until I did sort of retrospective work that I understood, huh? So people can use certain words and mean other things. And that's one of the things about growing up in an honest home, or where honesty was valued as something that we all do, is that you don't do those things, you know. And so sometimes you have to meet people who are in that mentality that you can actually do this to other people. You can just play in their faces like they're dumb, and that's something that you see a lot in high schoolers. They know that they did wrong, but they know that if they just deny it, they might get away with it, as opposed to accepting what they know is the outcome, you know? And that's just human nature. That's not me talking down on these behaviors, because that's what we all do. We don't want to be in trouble, especially with what the type of trouble that a high school kind of brings about. That's the whole topic in and of itself, how like just being a human is looked at as unredeemable in high school. That's where we get trained to live only from the mask. Um, anyways, that's
And
all.
honestly,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say that's all to say that, like, I just know I don't even have to conceptualize this anymore. I understand whenever I meet somebody, I know where they're at, and then I have to be somebody who they can understand. You know, because I understand what they're telling me, but I understand that if I misuse my communication, if I misuse words, they're going to completely understand things from their perspective, and that's a pain. That's a pain.
And so what I was gonna say real quick is, which that's a good point that you bring up, but um, just going back to values in general, just kind of what we were talking about, there are two sets of values that we carry. There's the ones that we live by and the ones that we perform. And so outlining the ones that we perform is what we really need to think about before we even worry about which ones we live by. Because they for and this is why honestly, because what we kind of do is we'll be like, what topic do we want to talk about? And oh, I want to talk about this one. And so he brought this one up, and I was like, damn. Honestly, I don't even know. Like, I couldn't even think of one because and so this is what I was going to say when I was going to interrupt you is it brings up the point of where we were talking about having a second life within this one life that we live, but that'll be a whole other podcast we cover. But I'll shed a little light on it. Um, we are conditioned to think that everything that we experience is what our life is going to be forever. And it's like literally as simple as saying it's not. Like, for example, me, I'm learning to play the guitar. My roommate, one of my good friends now, his name is Ryan. And he was like, yeah, bro, I love playing the guitar. I could teach you. And I was like, damn, really? Just like that? And he was like, yeah, bro, it's easy. And honestly, playing the guitar is because I used to play the viola as a young man. And so playing the guitar is like something I always wanted to do, but just something I never could do. But not because I wasn't capable, just honestly, like I literally never thought I'd be able to play it. Like I always would strum the guitar. My sister has a guitar. She'll tell you, like, I can't play it. My ex girlfriend, Sarah, she had a ukulele. She'll tell you, I tried to play it, couldn't play it. And so that's just something like I literally never thought I could do. So now inside the second life, here I am playing the guitar. But we'll save that episode for another day. But coming back to this point of the ones that we live by, the values that we live by, we can't even address those because it's like, well, what ones do we perform? What ones are a creation of the mask that we had to wear in order to even exist in the worlds of certain people? And so for me, just outright one that jumps at me is strength. My dad, Ali, one day I imagine you'll meet my pops. Um, this dude's fucking crazy, bro. Like, not so much anymore. And we'll even have to do a podcast sometime on just our experiences between both our parents, mom and dad, separately. But for me, I mean, my dad's 6'6", New Jersey born. He's just fucking hard ass, bro. Like, definition of wake up, go to work, no excuses, come home, never miss a day off, don't play in my face, don't lie to me, don't curse. Like, my dad was very strict. And so I had no choice but to make a mask of that same similar magnitude when I would say that my mom gave me a heart of compassion. And so I had a heart of compassion, but a mask of like, don't fuck with me, otherwise I'll burn you. But that really wasn't who I was. And so, here I am finding myself in a situation where it's like, damn, my heart's beating, my heart's racing, but I've got to wear this mask because if I don't, then I'll be seen as soft. And even to say like that did create a person who was strong, but going back to the earlier points, out of the foundation was in soil that was weak because that strength was not created in a foundation that was bulletproof. It was created in a foundation that was like, if I'm not hard, then who am I? Because I'm not going to be who it is that people want me to be. So that's just to say, let's make sure for the people who are doing their shadow work and kind of just accessing their subconscious mind and asking these questions to themselves, let's make sure that we're looking for the values that we're performing first, annihilate those, and then focus on the ones that we live by. Just because if we don't, and this is just speaking from experience, and I'm sure Ollie, honestly, not even just Ollie, I'm sure anybody who's had some form of an ego death, some form of a spiritual awakening, and even if it isn't spiritual in the sense of like connecting to yourself, if you're Christian, Muslim, any religion, it doesn't matter. I'm sure anybody would tell you that if you don't do something like that, eventually you'll have to turn around, walk all the way backwards, and clean that pile up, and then walk all the way forwards again. And sometimes that is just a part of the lesson in life that we have to learn. And there is no necessarily skipping a lesson. We always have to come back and learn a lesson. But if we can help ourselves in the now, that way we don't have to come back in the future. That's obviously something to, always make sure we can do. Just work in terms of being the most efficient in our healing. Because healing isn't linear, and that's actually something else I want to speak about as well in a pod, is that a lot of people are under the assumption that your healing is like from A to B, or rather A to Z, when it's not. You might go to A, you might go to F, you might go to G, you might go to I, L, bouncing all the way around. the point isn't to go from A to Z. The point is to complete the alphabet. And so you have to keep that in mind with identifying something like looking at your values, just because, again, the more that you put emphasis on what values do I have, which ones do I live by, you might not even be 100% sure if those values you live by are actually values that you like. And let's go back to what Ali said earlier. How many values, and he was absolutely right by saying this, how many values do you live by that are really just external projections of someone else's life? So you're not even quite sure if the values that you're living by are really yours. They're just the values that you've kind of, like, okay, my teacher said I should do this, I'm gonna do this. The lady at daycare said I should do this, I should act this way, I do this. But they're only saying that because they themselves have had values projected on them, gone through their life experience and said, no, this is the way that I'm going to do it. And so now in that way, they're coming to be the teacher to teach you that. And so it is to say that you have to look within your own self and find your own meaning of a value, in order to really even understand what that value is. You can't just go based off what was always instilled in you.
Yes, and just to note on polarity, I guess everything has its pole. So a lot of the things that you look at, a lot of the values that you perform, that you look at, and you really don't align with them. And this is more intuitive. You can't know a yes or no when you ask these questions. Um, the the opposite of that value could be possibly what your true value is, or somewhere in between. You don't have to be on extremities either. Um, and it's very much individual. We can't all follow the same framework, I guess, because just like snowflakes, we were built in very specific, unique patterns.
We're all our own experience, we're all our own thoughts. We all experience life on a different understanding, just because, again, we're all our own people. And so that's really important to highlight as well, is that even to say us, like sitting here talking about this isn't for us to put our projections onto you. It's for us to talk to your subconscious and you look within yourself and say, okay, I hear what they're saying. What do I value? What is, my system of belief, if you will? And those are kind of interchangeable in a way, maybe not exactly one to one. But your system of belief, your values, it is what is made of your experience in life. And that's obviously to say, like, not everybody has the same value system, right? Like, I almost call it, like, when I'm looking at it, I think of it as like a street code, right? Like, not every hood has the street code. Some don't, shoot at civilians. Some don't shoot at older or elderly at kids. Some do. Some have no regard at all. They say everybody's going under. And so that is just everybody's different code, everybody's different value. What makes those values, what is a compiled reasoning for those values, is subjective to everybody's own experience. But at the same time, again, it is because we all our own people. We're all our own person individually. So that's something as well to keep in mind of importance.
Yeah.
And so do you have anything else to kind of put into values? Because I mean, for me, that's kind of it. I mean, if I had to say, because that's kind of like what are values slash what do we think about values. Maybe if we want to just spend a little time speaking about what we think of our own values, and I'll kind of go first. For me, I mean, my first value of, I guess you could say, foundation was family. That's something that my dad instilled in me at a very young age, and even my mom as well. Just value, family, respect of family, treating family above all else, tending to family problems. And so within that foundation, I kind of developed a lot of, I wouldn't say toxic traits, but just like looking past certain things, like making a mask on top of the masks that I was already creating to interact with family, or even just friends, because this is also likable to friends as well. But on top of those masks that I was creating so many values that were attached to that mask. Like, again, I'll highlight, because I kind of already really spoke about them, but like that one with fear in my father. I'll share a quick story real quick. I just remember being in the principal's office, and I literally could hear the my dad talking to the principal, so I know the principal could hear him. And his name is Mr. Dorn. Shout out to Mr. Dorn. That was my guy. I was always in his office. I was a bad little kid, but I could hear my dad on the phone with the principal. So I always would think to myself, like, I can hear, I know the principal can hear my dad when he's talking to me. And so the principal would be like, yeah, I've got D'Angelo in my office again. He's, acting up. He got written up, blah, 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 blah. And my dad, it sounds sweet as ever. Like, yeah, man, let me talk to him, whoop de woo. And so I get on the phone. I'm like, hello. And he'd be like, man, when I get home, I'll whoop your fucking ass. Why you keep acting out? You got these people calling me at the school, blah, blah, blah. And so I just am thinking like that mask that I would wear in that moment was like, dude, my heart was nothing but fear. Like, or my body was nothing but fear hearing that shit from my dad. But the look on my face in the principal's office was like, I'm cool, I'm calm, like I'm good. And it's just to say like the smallest things that we're doing or the smallest experiences that we're having are shaping our experience to live, because what did that manifest into? That manifested into me not necessarily being able to communicate myself or express what it is that I really felt in times where it's like I'm getting my ass chewed out. And not to say that's like a whole separate conversation, but just to share that story. I mean, it manifested into a lot of things for me, just dealing with a struggle of kind of expressing my emotions in general. And that's already something that's hard as a man to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's I see it a lot in the teenagers that I work with. Because the thing is that I've taken my job as a observational study. I just go in there, I teach what I have to teach, I outline what I have to do, and just I literally just sit back and observe these kids have a free day, essentially. Because there is things to do, but they know it's a sub day, so they don't take it seriously and they just talk. And so I see these dynamics of the mask, and mostly on. You always know the problematic kids right away. They make their presence known. It's so funny, but it's essentially a cry for help, and that's not to. This is never to minimize them, right? They're individuals, very capable individuals. They're going through these experiences, but it's like this is all they know. This is how they know to cry for help, to just resist, because they don't get that at home. They don't get the luxury of resisting at home. So anyways, that's just to say it's a very common thing that I see every day, every single day.
And so, did you want to share any
So
of your person?
a kind of like a hack, a code, I guess, a cheat code. Um, the way that when I started to really take my values seriously, it was back when I was like, oof, my mind opened up to this whole possibility that life could be structured like a video game. Like you can literally have abilities and attribution points to your personality and all of that. It's tweakable. The thing is that you need awareness into yourself essentially, and eventually you'll understand, oh, I follow this pattern and it leads me to this, but I don't want that in my life, so I can do this thing, I can move this piece, that it's just got a whole domino effect that I avoid a whole future that I'm stuck in. So breaking patterns. Understand that they're malleable. Your values won't always stick with you, and usually it's what we strive for, where we see ourselves lacking. And it's not about the value itself, really, because those are just terms. It's about the essence of it. Why do you feel like you need to follow that? And sometimes the answer is because I was told to. And that's the hardest one to come to conclusion with. Because a lot of us form whole storylines around what other people told us we should be living our life in a certain way. So for me, it was family too, right? But that's because I was the uncle of 11 fucking kids. So I had a lot of pressure on what my life should look like to these kids. And that's why I had to move. I was like, I'm not about to follow that storyline, because I've seen it on two of my uncles are queer, and they follow the whole storyline of staying with the family 100%. And there were repercussions to that, and I see it. And so I don't want to follow that narrative because I see it unfolding day by day. Like I can see myself in that narrative. But I understand that I can take steps right now. That if I change my values, essentially, my guiding compass, that I can avoid that future, you know?
Right.
So it's like I said, I used to look at values on a very surface level, but they go deep. Literally your desires. Why are you here? Essentially, they tie to that question very well. What are my values? What do I value in this existence? Well, why am I here?
I think that's an excellent ending. Unless you have anything else to say.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And so before we end off, I would just like to highlight the fact too that um, anything that we're experiencing in this life is a lesson. And so, kind of to just touch on what Ali said, I know I said that'd be the last thing, but just to kind of briefly touch on what he said, I mean, everything in this life is an experience. And so, I love that you gave the video game analysis, because I kind of think about that too. Maybe we'll talk about that on the next podcast a little bit more in detail. But it's all about gaining awareness of your situation and understanding how you can actually control it. Not that you're just what's the word I want to word, or not even word statement I want to say is like you're not just reacting to life. You should be creating life. And a lot of people who are just reacting to life, we often use the term are just asleep or not consciously awake, because things are not happening to us, they are happening for us to learn from, gain more perspective, aka attribute points, and then add them to our skills, aka level up, and get the things that we want. And so that is likable to say. You don't start off as a level one, no consciousness, and have a fucking an arsenal of weapons. Like if we're playing an RPG game, right? Like you're not gonna have level 100 armor, 100 sword. You're gonna start with the basics: a wooden sword, wooden chest plate. Whatever game you play, make the comparison to that. But you gain your attribute points through experiences, aka these lessons you learn. And instead of dwelling on the lessons, you need to be consciously aware to take the perceivable learning points from them, aka your attribute points, your skill points, whatever you want to call them, and apply them to your character and level up, and then be able to afford the diamond sword, the platinum armor, whatever you want to call it. So, but yeah, we'll wrap it up. That was episode 2 of Welcome to the Spaceship with Ali and DLO. And yeah, thanks for listening. We'll be back with episode 3.
Thank you. Have a lovely time. Bye.